friends, I'm Chelsea and I'm here with my April reading wrap up. So by now you probably noticed that I like cozy things, so I thought I would just do a little, here comes my cat, yay. I thought I would just do a little cozy PJs, candle, nighttime ambiance kind of video. So I read 7 books. 4 of those were physical books and 3 were audiobooks, which normally I read more audiobooks than physical books, but soon you will know why I read less audiobooks, and the hint is it has to do with Brandon Sanderson. Enough said. April was kind of an interesting month. I felt kind of unfocused and distracted a lot of the time, kind of slumpy. I ended up enjoying a lot of the books, but I don't know, I just kind of felt not like 100% into it at the same time. So I felt like I didn't read as many books as I had hoped, but also 7 is more than I was expecting at the beginning of the month, just because I was kind of moving really slow and having a hard time really focusing. Hopefully May will be a little better, but I do feel really good about what I ended up reading in April. So let's jump in. The first book I read in April was an audiobook, and it was A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. So far I've only read Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows by her, and so I really wanted to check out A River Enchanted. I heard really good things about it, and I really enjoyed it a lot. This book was just beautiful, lyrical, lush, stunning writing. This whole book is just gorgeous. The world just kind of sweeps you away. Beautiful imagery, descriptive writing, very like musical. It's based on like Celtic, Scottish folklore, and the characters were really good in this one. I'll give you just a little overview. So this is about 4 main characters, Jack and Adara, and then Sidra and Torin. And so Jack, who is a bard, he's off away from his home, which is the Isle of Cadence, but he hears about these missing girls back home, and so he's called to go back. Basically, people believe that the spirits of the Isle have kidnapped them or lured them away, and only music can communicate with the spirits, I think. Honestly, it's been a while since I've read this, so some details are foggy. So Jack basically is the only one who can communicate with these spirits and hopefully find these missing girls. And he is linked up with Adara, who is an heiress of the East and his childhood enemy. She's very engaged in this plot summary. And so they're kind of like rivals, enemies, you know, the classic situation, and they're linked together to look for these missing girls, and they discover a lot of things that they were not expecting. There's a lot of tension between the clans, a lot of like political elements. All right, cool, just make yourself at home here. And then at the same time there are Sidra and Torin, and they're a married couple. Sidra is a healer and very devout in her faith, and just kind of looking to promote peace and love and harmony. And Torin is I can't remember his role, but he's some sort of like protector, and he is doing anything to kind of protect his people and has a lot of anger and vengeance towards the other clan. And so the two of them is a really interesting combo. So yeah, I really enjoyed the 4 main characters, their relationships, their romance, just a really sweet look at how love can develop over time, even if it wasn't there from the beginning. A lot of depth and just beautiful moments in the relationships. I wasn't super attached with Jack and Adara at first, but over time I really enjoyed their relationship. I also really appreciated how Rebecca Ross wrote some of the romance and love scenes. Very beautiful and sensual in some ways, but not explicit, and I feel like that goes a long way. And there's some really good like strong family ties and communal elements as well. I thought the world and the magic was interesting. It's very elemental with these different spirits of the Isle. I felt like I wanted a little more with the magic system and all that, which is kind of how I felt with Divine Rivals. So I'm curious as to how that will be in the second book. I definitely want to read that because this one ended on a very intense cliffhanger. I need to know what happens. Also, this one kind of was a slow start to me, but it was very engaging throughout. It definitely had like cozy vibes, and the audiobook was great. So I really enjoyed this one a lot. I don't remember like a ton of details about it, but I would recommend it for sure, and I do want to read the second book. So there were like a million beautiful quotes from this. I'm just gonna give you my favorite. I am but a verse inspired by your chorus, and I will follow you until the end. When the Isle takes my bones, and my name is nothing more than a remembrance on a headstone next to yours. Next, I read Crooked Kingdom. I don't even know what to say. Just love this duology. It was a 5-star duology for me. I am obsessed with Six of Crows, Crooked Kingdom, and all of these characters. I feel like they've ruined me for every other book. I'm just like comparing them now. So that gives you a little sense of what I thought about this book. So this is book 2 of the Six of Crows duology. And if you know, Six of Crows is basically a heist story. There's a lot of things that happen, a lot of things that go wrong. I'm not going to tell you what happened, but basically things didn't quite end up how they expected it, and that carries over into this book. So Casbecker and his group of gang members, kind of the outcasts of society, they're all caught up basically in the after effects of what happened after their heist, and there's a lot of stuff going on back in Ketterdam, and they're just trying to put the pieces back together. They're basically fighting for their lives and trying to figure out what to do. I will say I think I liked Six of Crows slightly more than Crooked Kingdom, but it's very close. I read this one slowly. I feel like I just wanted to take it all in because I did not want it to end. But there were times where I also felt kind of like unfocused and distracted. And I think that was just me. It's not the book. I just, for whatever reason, had a bit of a hard time in April with some books. So it took me a long time to read this one. But I did love it. I loved how everything kind of fell apart for these characters and then how it came back together. There were so many schemes and twists. These characters are just so flawed but lovable. I literally love all of them and all the different relationships, platonic and romantic. There are a lot more romantic relationships explored in this one. I just love the depth of these characters, their backstories. We got a lot more of that, their motivations, and they went through so much growth, especially Jesper and Wylan and even Kaz. I really loved seeing Kaz try to open up more. He's had a rough time, and he and Inej together, I just love that combo. Inej is like one of my favorite fictional characters. She's just so wise and strong, thoughtful. I really loved how her story ended. I love Nina and Matthias, Wylan and Jesper as well. I mean, it's a lot of the same comments of Six of Crows. I can't go into detail without spoiling it. I'm like always recommending these books now, and I can't believe it took me so long to read these. So I'm gonna read a quote. This is from Kaz about why crows are the symbol of his gang. Crows remember human faces. They remember the people who feed them, who are kind to them, and the people who wrong them too. They don't forget. They tell each other who to look after and who to watch out for. And then this was one from Inej about Kaz, I believe. It's a short one. She would fight for him, but she could not heal him. Again, I just love Leigh Bardugo's writing in this and really hope to read more of her books. Okay, next up, this is my only non-fantasy book. I realized literally every book I read in April was fantasy, and the only one that wasn't was a non-fiction. So it was the month of fantasy, which is great. So this one was one of my book club picks, and this was The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion. This is a memoir of a year in her life, basically, where within the span of, I think, 2 weeks, her daughter got sick. They thought it was like the flu, the pneumonia, and then septic shock, and she ended up going to the hospital and was in a medically induced coma. And then like a week later, her husband has a heart attack and dies. So this just kind of goes into the year following that and her experience with grief and loss and the ongoing situation with her daughter, where she's kind of in and out of the hospital, getting better then getting worse. I listened to the audiobook. So this was an interesting one because I can't really say that I enjoyed my reading experience of this, but at the same time, I really think this is a worthwhile story, and I know a lot of people have loved this one and have connected with it a lot, but personally, I didn't really connect with it, and I don't know if that's just because I haven't had a lot of grief and loss in my life, but also I just feel like I didn't really connect with the writing style more than anything. It was very stream of consciousness and kind of random. I had a hard time following some of her thought processes and threads and different stories, which I know when you're dealing with grief and loss, your brain is not necessarily thinking super coherently and or linearly. So I understand how she wrote it was very indicative of how she was processing and dealing with everything, but I don't know. Maybe I just didn't get it. It was interesting in my book club because 2 of us felt the same, like we didn't really relate to it a lot, didn't love it, and then the other 2 really were impacted by it. And I realized I didn't know that magical thinking was an actual concept. Maybe that would have affected my experience of it. Basically, it's like if you think a certain way or think about something something that it'll happen in real life. And a lot of it was her thinking things like, well, if I do this, then maybe my husband will be alive. Like, if I leave my shoes out, he won't be dead because he'll come back and he needs his shoes. Like, things like that don't make sense when you're thinking rationally, but when you are clouded by grief and loss, that's just where your brain goes. So maybe I would have understood it and appreciated it more if I had known about that. Also, it felt like a lot of medical terms and a lot of like name dropping. I just didn't connect with the parts of it. I also felt like it was very detached and more rationalizing it sometimes and not as emotional as I was expecting it to be. It did get more like what I was expecting it to be in the last like 20% or so, and I feel like I just wanted more of that. Like, she really started to dig deeper into the emotional elements of her grief. Maybe she just got more to that point later on in the year. So I don't know. I had some complicated feelings about this. I really did enjoy hearing about her relationship with her husband and her daughter. They seem like a really sweet and close family. So that was really sad because I know that was just heartbreaking for her to lose her husband and her daughter. She talked a lot about memories and just how our memory is affected when we go through grief. This was definitely a sobering reminder of mortality. She would talk about how you're just going about your ordinary life and then one day everything changes. So I think a lot of people probably would connect with this. I personally didn't, but there are some good takeaways from it. So I will read a couple quotes. I liked this one. Marriage is memory, marriage is time. Marriage is not only time, it is also paradoxically the denial of time. And then, we are not idealized wild things. We are imperfect mortal beings, aware of that mortality even as we push it away, failed by our own very complication. So wired that when we mourn our losses, we also mourn, for better or for worse, ourselves, as we were, as we are no longer, as we will one day not be at all. Okay, next up I read Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. This was my 3-word title prompt. I realized I think I only read 2 books from my actual TBR jar prompts. I read my book club picks and then my 3 actually free picks. So only 2 of them were TBR jar prompts. So maybe I'll do better with that in May. We'll see. But anyway, so Half a Soul was one of my actual prompts, and I had wanted to read this one for a very long time, and I liked it. I didn't love it as much as I thought I would, which was a little disappointing, but I still had a good time with it and would recommend it. So this one basically is about Theodora Eddings, or Dora. She lives in Regency, England. She was cursed by a fairy, which left her with only half a soul, so she doesn't feel things like fear or embarrassment or other emotions like that, and she often kind of feels left out, or like she doesn't quite understand how to respond to certain social interactions. So she and her cousin Vanessa are thrown into high society trying to look for husbands, and she comes across the Lord Sorcerer Elias, and he does not want anything to do with like high society. He has a very negative reputation, but he notices her and he eventually finds out her condition. They get thrown together. They are looking into these fairy affairs, as they're called, and then there is also this element that I didn't know about but was a pleasant surprise. There's like these workhouses, which were a real element of history. It was a result of the war. There were a lot of like sick and wounded, and then also just like the outcasts of society. They're in these workhouses and it's really bad conditions. Forgot some of the details, honestly. This book, I enjoyed it, but there were some forgettable elements. But basically, Elias, the Lord Sorcerer, is trying to help these people, protect them, and make their conditions better. But there's also some weird like fairy things going on that he's looking into. Basically, that's it. It's very cozy, very similar vibes to Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, which I love, and also very much like Bridgerton, Jane Austen kind of feel. So I love the historical elements with the cozy vibes, and there's a little romance too. I really enjoyed the 2 main characters. I did not like Elias at first, but he redeemed himself, and I love Dora. She's just super sweet and honest, funny, quirky. I really enjoyed her a lot. I enjoyed their relationship. I thought it was really cute and heartwarming. I just enjoyed her journey of accepting herself over time and not trying to be something else. This one is not a lot of plot, not a lot going on. There were times where I was like a little bored, felt kind of slow, but overall it did have good atmosphere, good feeling. It's a short book, so it's a fairly easy read. I did enjoy enjoy the commentary on high society versus these workhouses and caring for the less fortunate. I definitely would like to read more of the series. I was intrigued by the ending. Really, that's all I had to say. It was fun and cute. It was not what I was expecting necessarily. I think I just need to not hype books up in my head so much, but I think this was a cute one. I have 2 quick quotes. It may be true that you only have half a soul, Dora, but that does not make you half a person. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention, I think the author said that Dora is portrayed as neurodivergent, which seems very true in this, and I think the author herself is neurodivergent, so that made sense a lot, but it also felt kind of weird to be like, you only have half a soul, but I think in the end, the message was that doesn't make you any less whole or less of a person, so that was just a side note. Okay, here is another quote that I'll leave you with. Sometimes when you cannot force the world to come to its senses, you must settle only for wiping away some of the small evils in front of you. Next up, we have What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez. This was another book club pick, and this was my 3rd favorite book of the month after my 2 5-stars, which you'll hear about the other 5-star. But I really enjoyed this one a lot. So this is a historical fantasy, and it's set in Egypt, and basically it's about this character named Inez. She is Bolivian Argentinian, I believe. She lives in Buenos Aires, and she is similarly in high society. I think it's around the same time period actually as Half a Soul. She is just living in this world, has to have a chaperone. They want her to be married off. So she's in Buenos Aires. Her parents are off in Egypt. They're exploring and researching stuff. She finds out that her parents have passed away. So she ends up going to Egypt, given this massive fortune, and then her uncle becomes her guardian. He doesn't really want her there because it's dangerous, but she ends up going anyway, and she gets involved kind of in what her parents were into, and she's trying to uncover the mystery of what happened to them, how they died, what they were looking into, because they never really told her. Then of course her uncle's assistant is very handsome and mysterious, and so they become involved in some way. This one has just a lot of mystery, intrigue, adventure, and magic fantasy elements in the historical setting with the romance. So there are a lot of really fun elements to this. I feel like this one kind of got me out of the slump a little bit. I read it very quickly and was hooked pretty much right away. This one is YA, so it reads very quickly, and it was just really fun. I just had a great time. I felt like I was in Egypt. I loved the food descriptions and the cultural elements, the textures, the colors. It felt very vivid. I really want to go to Egypt now. There are a lot of great twists and turns here. Some of them felt kind of predictable, but I had a great time nonetheless. So this one has been compared to The Mummy meets Death on the Nile, which felt very accurate. Also kind of like Indiana Jones. I don't know if anyone liked National Treasure. I loved that movie, and it kind of had that feel. A lot of archaeological, adventurous kind of mystery elements. I hadn't really read a book like this before in this kind of setting with the archaeological elements of it. So I really liked that. I'm really excited for the second book, which doesn't come out till November. This one also addressed things like British colonialism, gender inequality, and then there's a big element of tourists and other people defacing cultural artifacts, which is kind of random, but that was a big element of this. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, Inez takes with her this magical ring that is kind of leading her to these items and revealing these things to her. And so the magic was kind of cool because there's this old magic that has not existed for a long time, but it latches onto these items, and the less that they've been touched or dealt with, the more magic is in them. And so certain items have more magic than others, and Inez happens to have this magical ring that has not been dealt with a lot, and she has these very strong inclinations. I thought that was really cool. Also, I really enjoyed the romance. Lots of angst, witty banter. It was pretty slow burn, which I appreciate. A couple things happened at the end that I was not expecting and not sure how I feel about, but overall really enjoyed this book. It's one of my new favorite historical fantasies. Highly recommend. Couldn't find a lot of quotes when I was looking them up, but here's a couple. The Nile knew everything. It had seen the best and worst of Egypt. And then, that was the smile I didn't trust. I just knew it came with consequences. He was the kind of person who could charm someone while robbing them blind. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention Whit, her love interest. He's very much morally gray. I love a good morally gray, broody, mysterious love interest. It might be cliche, but I love it. Okay, next up I read Once Upon. Let's try that again. Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. This is a booktube favorite. I'm very happy I finally read it. This one is about Evangeline. She is a hopeless romantic, but her love decides to marry someone else. So she desperately makes this deal with the Prince of Hearts, who is like this fantastical creature. Basically, to help her out, he asks for 3 kisses and he chooses when and where they're given. She realizes over time that making a deal with him was not a great idea, and it's kind of a dangerous situation, and Jax, the Prince of Hearts, is stringing her along. It's kind of hard to describe what happens from there. This whole book, I felt like we were just along for the ride, like transported. I love that element. It's very much fairy tale feel, light and fluffy with a little bit of darker elements, definitely very like whimsical, enchanting. So this was another really quick and easy read, also YA. Just wanted to keep reading this one. It was really fun. For some reason the plot and this book in general was different from what I expected. I don't know what I expected, but I really enjoyed it. Evangeline, she's very sweet. She is a little naive and too trusting at times, but I liked her a lot. And Jax, who is the Prince of Hearts, he is pretty dreamy and very mysterious. Again, morally gray. I loved their interactions, their banter, their connection. And then there were fun things like tiny dragons and vampires. Just a very transportative, is that a word? The world was very cool, beautiful, vivid, descriptive writing. We have like curses, prophecies, potions, spells. There were little things written in the book like newspaper articles and letters. There were a lot of crazy things that happened at the end. I felt like the ending was a little rushed. It was definitely not a happy ending like you would expect in a fairy tale, but there's 2 more books, so you would expect that it doesn't wrap up in a nice little bow. I would say like this was not like a new obsession of mine, but I really did enjoy it a lot. Highly recommend it. Just love the journey of this. It was a really fun read. Here's a quote. "He was still indescribably breathtaking, but it was all the tragic beauty of a sky where every single star was falling. His hair was a storm of broken gold. His eyes were a mess of silver and blue." I've heard that the 2nd and 3rd books are even better, so I cannot wait to see where the series goes, and I'm happy I finally read this one. Okay, last but not least, I did it, y'all. I completed The Way of Kings. I listened to it. I did end up reading along towards the end, listening and reading, and I'm glad I had the physical copy because, wow, there is a lot going on. I loved this. It was my other 5-star read of the month besides Crooked Kingdom. I'm so pleasantly surprised. I said before I was very intimidated, which yeah, it's over 1,000 pages. The audiobook was 45 hours, and I listened/read it in just over 3 weeks, way faster than I expected. Of course, at the beginning, it was a lot to take in. Tons of world building, tons of new characters, new places. Everything was a lot. I was confused at the beginning. It took some time. I got into it, and over time, I just was soaking it all in, and by the end, I could not put it down. But really the whole time I did feel engaged, even though I might have had some questions or was trying to take it all in. I really felt engaged the whole time and did not want to put it down. I was expecting that I would maybe want to take a break, maybe listen to another book, but I didn't. I just kept going, and I loved it all. This one is very hard to describe what's going on because it's so long. It's an epic fantasy, so I'm probably not really going to go into all the plot, but basically it follows these 3 main characters, Dalinar, Kaladin, and Shallan, and they're in this world that is very much ruled by the weather and these crazy unpredictable storms that very much affect how everyone lives their lives and where certain cities are based. There's obviously also magical elements, and there's a lot of political things going on. There's a war, basically. The 3 main characters, they're going through a lot. I think the world building is amazing. The magic system, there's all the historical elements, their culture, religion, politics. There's some mystery, lots of twists and turns, great character development. I feel like just everything about this, Brandon Sanderson does so well. Obviously, he's a huge fantasy author for reasons. This is not news to anyone, but I thought it was really well done. I definitely want to keep reading the series. I'm gonna take a break because it's a lot, but get to the next one soon. Probably stood out for me, I feel like, really was the characters. I loved all three of the main characters, especially Kaladin, and he has like this crew of ragtag people and they really become like this family. I love just watching them and watching him grow. He has a lot of struggles throughout the course of this book, especially like mental health struggles, all these ups and downs, highs and lows, and little things that kind of pull him out of it, and then he goes back down into the slump. Just watching his journey was really interesting. He has this little friend named Syl. She's basically like a sprite. She's called a Spren in their world. She's his little like companion, and I really enjoyed her. I also really enjoyed Dalinar, one of the other main characters. Just watching all the different characters, watching their struggles and their thought processes, getting some backstories. There were some good strong female characters here and like tiny hints of romance, not really much. I really enjoyed Shallan's storyline as well. She's like this scholar basically who goes to the city. She tries to study under Yasna, who is part of the royalty, but she's there to steal something from her under the guise of being a scholar. So it's kind of an interesting storyline. There was just a lot of depth going on with these characters. Just really cool how things came together in the end. It's definitely a slow burn, but very satisfying and worth it in the end. So I definitely recommend this one. I know a lot of people are intimidated by it, but I'd say just try to jump in, and I hope that it'll be worth it for you. It was definitely worth it for me, and I really enjoyed the audiobook too. Here's a couple quotes. Somebody has to start. Somebody has to step forward and do what is right because it is right. Sometimes the prize is not worth the costs. The means by which we achieve victory are as important as the victory itself. So those were the 7 books I read in April. I did really enjoy a lot of them. So let me know if you've read any of these books or if they're on your TBR and what your thoughts are. As always, let me know also what 1 or 2 of your favorite books from April were. Thanks as always for being here. That is all for now. Bye!